comes in the name of the Lord.
Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. There are so many things that happen in life to which we have no answers, writes Tyrus Hinton. He knows firsthand how life can change with a single visit to the doctor. The number one stressor in life is the death of a child. Professional counselors refer to life change units, and none rank so high as a child's death, then followed by divorce or separation. For Tyrus and his wife, the death of their child of leukemia sent them into a darkness that many couples never recover from. In his book, Baby Steps, I'm Diagnosed, Now What?, Tyrus unpacks the trauma they went through, but more importantly, describes what couples can do to lessen the impact. The high stress rate often leads to illness or, in worst cases, separation or even divorce. Tyrus and his wife not only survived the death of their son, he endured a cancer diagnosis of his own, and they now have 3 children. What do you do when faced with so many questions? He says his faith was pivotal to his survival, as were simple steps like learning to listen to medical professionals, self-care, building a support team, journaling, and how to navigate the complexities of treatment. All of a sudden, every emotional imaginable hits you like a ton of bricks. It hit us so hard that some days we could barely move. There are some people who cope with tragedy better than others, but everyone experiences some form of frustration, questioning, and even denial. Some people do not endure their challenging times very well. This kind of crisis has the potential of destroying your relationship with others and with God. It didn't, and now he and his wife, who have been married for 25 years, navigate and help you navigate this journey. He says it's not unusual to ask questions like, why me? Why my kid? Why God? Why my family? What did I do wrong? The questions eventually come into focus, even if they lack solid answers. Tyrus Hinton has been providing emotional support to families for the past 2 decades. He helps families who have received a terminal diagnosis. He and his wife lost a son to cancer, and he has survived a cancer diagnosis of his own. He works through the Hinton Cares Foundation, giving families practical direction, emotional support, and encouragement after a terminal diagnosis. He's been married for 25 years, has 3 children, holds a bachelor's degree in religion from North Carolina College of Theology. You can find him at hintoncaresorganization.org. The proceeds from your purchase of any of the Baby Steps resources will assist providing a generous care package to families that are in the hospital or local Ronald McDonald houses or extended stay or with any form of childhood disease. The package usually includes snacks for parents and siblings, gas cards, and an emotional support resource. Here to talk about his journey and his book, Baby Steps, I'm Diagnosed, Now What?, is Tyrus Hinton. Tyrus, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Eric. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, and thank you for being so transparent as to share the agony and the ecstasy, the heartbreak of losing a child, of going through that experience, turning right around after that experience and being diagnosed with cancer yourself. And if it wasn't enough that you were in this recovery mode from one dealing with cancer to have another, but to be compelled to take what the enemy meant for evil and to show the world that God will use it for his good and for his glory. I'm reminded of the story in John chapter 9 about the blind man. Rabbi, who sinned? Was it the blind man or was it his parents? And Jesus answers him and says, neither, that God might be glorified. And this is what you and your wife have been doing for the last 25 years, is addressing that very thing. Who sinned? Neither. It's not the family, it's not the child. It's so that God would be glorified. How were you raised so that you had this faith? Were you raised in a family that was faith-based? Was this imparted to you by a strong mother, a strong grandmother, a strong church identity? How did this faith become your own?
Well, I grew up in a very conservative Christian home. My grandmother, since we're, of course, talking Bible reference, you think about Paul when he says, remember the unfaith faith of your grandmother, Eunice and Lois, and how it was stirred. And my grandmother was a woman of great faith and understood that faith would carry us through every situation of our lives. So as times got difficult and things became challenging, I often found her in our living room downstairs on the corner of the couch on her knees praying, calling out to God. And I remember her telling me as a child growing up, we would be riding to church and she would say, Tyrus, if you can't pray in the hard times and in the good times, you won't be able to make it. And we was raised with the foundation of prayer, raised with the foundation of believing that there was nothing that was impossible for God to do for us, whether we was able to rejoice in that moment or whether rejoicing would come later. We still believed. We held on to our faith. So that's the basis of my faith. I was raised a strict conservative holiness church. We were very conservative in the things that we did, very conservative in the places that we went, mainly, as I look back on it, to keep us focused in a place of faith, really looking for the great resurrection day, to be honest with you. That's really where our faith was based and where it remains based right now. Even though maybe times have changed and some of our methods have changed, I still look forward to the day of the glorious resurrection. And my hope and my faith and my confidence is in Christ, not so much in the possessions of this world, which I can't take with me, but in the hope of seeing my eternal Savior one day. So that's where my base is. And that's honestly, Rabbi Eric, that's how I live. That's how I live my life. I'm faith-based. I just believe that all things are possible, whether they be challenging or good. I just believe. That's where my faith base is.
So here you have this foundation of faith. You have this answer, as 1 Peter challenges us to have an answer for the hope that lives within us. And hope is never a past tense. Hope is always future tense. You can't have hope in the crucifixion of Jesus. That already happened. That's 2,000 years old. You can't have hope. Can't have hope in the past. Hope is always future tense. And so the hope of His return, the promise of His return, and the resolution of this peace on earth, this defeating promise to us in Genesis 3:15 of the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent and the ultimate defeat of Satan on this earth that we will see with our eyes, the very destruction and the tearing down of evil and the rising up of healing and wholeness. And that is the hope that is in both of us. As you and your wife began to walk down this journey together, how did you meet? How did you two know that you knew that she was the one that God had chosen for you?
Well, let's go back to that foundation. We met in church. We were teenagers, a part of a youth group together, and just our faith grew together as our pastor would teach us, and as we would do things as, youth groups do, outings and different activities to build our faith and to learn the scriptures and to learn to not only a brotherly love, but my wife and I had a chance to experience a romantic kind of love, as teenagers. And it was a love that we decided as we continued, graduated high school, and my wife's first year of college, we decided that we wanted to love forever. We wanted to be together forever and not leave one another. So we developed something really, really early as teenagers. We said it was us against the world. Did we have a clue at that time? No, not one clue at all what we were talking about. We were teenagers. But in those early years, we would say, it's us against the world. It's me and you. We're going to do it. We're going to make it. We're going to live. We're going to love. We're going to show everyone how this thing is done. We had no clue, Rabbi Eric, what we were talking about and the things and challenges we would have to endure. But that's where we met. We met in church, and our foundation was built around something greater and bigger than us, which remains that, to be honest with you, while we love one another and we believe and we hold our vows so seriously and we take them just as they were given to us. We still place Christ at the center of our marriage. We still place Christ at the center of our relationship, just as we did as teenagers. Now, hopefully we're not acting like teenagers anymore, but we're certainly loving like those two teenagers that fell in love over 25 years ago.
So you embraced the words of King Solomon that a cord of three strands is not easily broken, that you had God at the center of this relationship, completely intertwined, knowing that God was not asking you to do more for him, he was asking you to do more with him. And yes, in understanding that he was to be a part of every part of your life, you began to see that manifest in this relationship that grew from this puppy love to this more mature, robust romance and biblical foundation for marriage. Was this your first child that was the one who had leukemia?
No, actually, he was number 3.
Number 3.
So he was number 3. We were young and in love and busy, Rabbi. We were busy. So our first 3 children were 11 months apart. Yeah, we're kind of busy there, huh?
Yes.
Those first 3 were 11 months apart. So he was number 3, diagnosed at 16 months, and fought that battle for 8 months.
So here you are, faith-based, devoted to God. You have 2 children who are developing. Everything is fine with them. Every reasonable expectation that child number 3 would just fall right in line with child number 1, child number 2. What did you begin to see that gave you pause to look closer as to what was going on that he wasn't exhibiting that the other 2 had?
Well, it was actually our child care provider who pointed that out to us. Terrell was a baby at that time, so he was still going to an actual in-home daycare, while the other 2 were attending a preschool, sort of, kind of. He was still attending an in-home daycare. And the babysitter kept saying to us, he wakes up at different times with this horrific scream, as if there's something inside that's just is terrible. And her name was Miss Williams at that time, and we just said, Miss Williams, are you sure? She said, listen, you kids are young. My wife and I were very young. She said, you kids are young. You need to take him to his pediatrician and see exactly what's going on with him. That might have lasted all of 2 or 3 days. We had made the appointment, took him to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician at that point said, okay, let's try an antibiotic and make sure he doesn't have any type of infection. Of course, both of his ears were infected at that point. And she was just trying to do what doctors do, just rule out every possible path of least resistance, if that makes sense. That lasted for about 2 weeks. We were going through giving him the antibiotic, and unfortunately, it didn't work well for him. It didn't help. The antibiotics and the Tylenol didn't help. And 2 weeks later, Ms. Williams, we found ourselves in that same situation again. This particular time, we went back to the pediatrician. They allowed us to see someone else. And when we saw someone else, she looked him in his eyes and said, Mr. Hinton and Mrs. Hinton, I have called ahead to the hospital. They're expecting you. I need you to go straight to the hospital. And we said, oh, man. So, of course, we're young. We don't really understand. We're saying, okay, what's going on? She says, well, according to what we see around his eyes, something called petechiae eye, little spots around the top of the eyebrow or around the top of the eyelid. She said, according to that, it looks like he might have what I'm suggesting could be leukemia. But I want you to go to the hospital. They will meet you. They are prepared for you. I want them to do some blood work. And from there, they will follow up with me. Well, we went to that hospital. From that hospital, they then called ahead to North Shore University Hospital, which was at that time a children's cancer hospital, and they told us they're prepared for you. So basically, we left work early, went to the doctor's office, from the doctor's office to one hospital. From that hospital, it was about midnight. They sent us about 40 minutes to Eastern Long Island to another hospital where then Terrell was admitted. And the very next day, the team of specialists came and diagnosed him with the most aggressive form of leukemia for a child at that time, AML. So, of course, were there any signs that you would say, oh my God, you should have seen this coming on? No, it's a normal baby crying, just the violent screams. And we're thankful, Rabbi. We're so thankful that we had a child care provider who didn't just, stick a pacifier in his mouth or try to feed him again, but really gave careful attention as if he was our own child and said, hey, get this baby to a doctor and let's see what's wrong with him. And just amazing how that worked out for us.
So AML is acute myeloid leukemia. It is in many cases, it's not curable. It's aggressive. Jason's mother last year passed from AML, and so we're really personally familiar with it here on our program because we were also very close. The news of this, here you have this strong foundation of faith, you and your wife. Incredible foundation of faith, have 2 other children. You now have Terrell, your third, and you hear the word cancer, even the first mention, even the first inference. How are you feeling? What response comes up inside of you? What has become your nature? Was it a God response? Was it a fear response? Was it a numbness? How would you define it?
To be very transparent, I believe it was just a human response. It wasn't faith. It wasn't fear. It was just human. It was just, what just happened? What did we just hear? What's really going on right now? All of the questions, we had just a lot of questions at that moment to try to understand what is going on with us at this time. Well, what's really happening right now? Kind of a numbness, to be honest with you, because not understanding the disease at all, not knowing about the disease, having 2 perfectly healthy older children, not having any issues or even having to spend time in the hospital with them outside of their birth, it was just a breathtaking moment for our family. For my wife and I, it was breathtaking. We just kind of had to let it sink in, if that makes sense. Had to just kind of let it sink in.
You talk a lot about learning to listen, weighing into what they're telling you, and processing what they're telling you. It can be overwhelming. It can be a lot more technical terms. You got to find a way to understand what they're saying. As you developed this capacity to be an active listener, what did you find was the benefit to you? What brought you to a deeper understanding of what was going on through this process?
Well, those pamphlets, at that time, medicine was a little different. Of course, technology was very different. We had pamphlets as opposed to now being able to have iPads and cell phones and different things of that nature to research stuff. So we had to rely on that information. We had to rely on the doctors telling us what step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 would be. And it was really important that we listened because if we missed one step and the nurse came in, we didn't know why they were there. If we missed one step of what the doctor said he was going to do next, we wouldn't know. And we had to listen to everyone, because it wasn't just one doctor, it was a team of doctors that would come around, and they would all give different input. Of course, we had one leader of the team, but every doctor would give some form of input. Again, we were young, and they were trying to console us and let us know that, this is aggressive, but we've caught it. This is aggressive, but we can handle it. This is aggressive, but medicine is improving. This is aggressive, but these methods we're working on right now, and we think that your son is eligible to potentially receive some of these clinical trials at that time. So it was important that we listen to know what would work for us and what would not work for our family, what would help us, what would not be a help for us. If we would be able to travel out of the state to go to another hospital, or if we were able to travel to the city, we had to know, could we afford it medically? What was covered in our medical coverage? I worked for the city of New York at that time, so I had excellent benefits. But we needed to know what part would be covered, what part wouldn't be covered. So active listening, we had to listen to everything, and we had to start writing stuff down, because just like you and I are sitting here speaking with one another, there are things that we just have to write down so that we can kind of make sure that we remember, we can point back to them, and we can go back to them as a point of reference. So my wife and I, we just started journaling. We bought a composition notebook, and we just started writing things down as they talked to us, so that when they left the room, my wife and I could talk to one another and make sure we had a good understanding of what they were trying to convey to us as it relates to the wellness of our child.
You talk about a new norm. You talk about a change in routine, that life is now completely different. This has become a new center of focus. How do you maintain the balance between church, faith, prayer, community, the other two children, creating a new, you actually have a chapter, erase the routine. There's got to be a new normal way of doing life. What did you do to incorporate this new norm?
Well, one thing I did do was, my wife and I, again, we both worked for the city of New York. I had a little bit of flexibility on my job in that I was able to switch my schedule. So creating a new norm, I had to erase my routine. I used to work 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Well, at that particular time, it just so happened that someone went out on medical leave on the night shift. So I was able to work on the beach at night from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Man, you talk about a routine change, because now my wife has to get the children together by herself in the morning, the other two, so that, so that she can get them about their day. And then I would typically get off of work and head straight to the hospital to stay there with him. We had a great support network, to be honest with you, who helped us through that. The hospital staff even somewhat became a part of our family, because they started helping us and saying, okay, we need to know your hours. We need to know where do we need to step in. And we had two CNAs on their days off who would fill in for us until I could get to the hospital, until my wife can get to the hospital. My wife, of course, had to stop working because she would need to be there at the hours that I couldn't be there. Our cousins, aunts, uncles got involved and helped us at the house with the other two children. So that's kind of our routine that changed. Did it become normal again? Absolutely not, because that routine even kept changing. We did make it to church as often as we could, I'm being honest with you. I tried to make sure I was there on Sundays, or my wife and I would alternate, and she would go and I would be at the hospital, or vice versa. And we did that. And then when he was home many times, and since Jason and you are very familiar that when your immune system is compromised, you can only be around so many people. So there are times when he was home, but we wasn't able to go to the church. So one of us would go, one of us would stay. And we just maximized those moments together. We would just have fun. We would maximize his time at home. When he felt good, we did fun things. When he didn't feel good, we did fun things, but with the other children so that they didn't feel the effect or the impact as much as we did with him. So when we say erase the routine, we erase the routine almost every day. You try to create a new routine, you have to erase that. You try to create a new routine, he starts running a fever. We have to go back to the hospital. We just try to create a new routine. Oh, okay, we're going to do this week. Nope, you're not going to do that because now he's developed an infection. So we have to go back, and we have to change things. And now one of us needs to be there 24 hours with him. So when I'm saying erase that routine, that's a pretty significant part that I don't think many people understand. When you're diagnosed with any type of terminal illness, life will never be normal again. Things will change. Even after you're cured and healed, things still change. You have follow-ups, you have doctor's appointments, you have different things that start happening because one part of the body affects another part of the body. Now you find yourself in different situations. So that's how we kind of handle it. And we just kind of bounce back and forth off of one another to make sure that every area was covered. Our church was very supportive to us. So they knew our situation, that we wasn't always able to come or that one of us could come. And our pastor was kind enough and the members of the church were kind enough sometime to come and visit with us and say, listen, we knew you couldn't come, so we brought the church to you. We're all coming to your house. We're all coming to hang out with you guys. We're all coming to encourage you. We're all coming to help you be stronger. So I hope that answers that for you.
It does. It does. It creates an understanding that I think in the natural we understand that there's going to be change, but I don't think we understand the impact that all things we knew that were normal are now not going to be normal, that there's going to be a new norm, and that new norm is going to have to be something that's going to be much more fluid than any other norm we had ever known. And it's not anything you can actually prepare for. It's something you have to surrender to in order to flow with it so that you can endure it. This is, I think, what brings a lot of the breakdown to a lot of relationships, is that my routine is now shattered and I have nothing. I have no anchor. I have nothing to hold on to. What I was holding on to is now fragile and is falling apart, and everything that I have known to be consistent and constant is no longer consistent and constant, and I can't count on it anymore. And that then drives us to that point of unsurety and insecurity, which then becomes a wedge in many relationships. We're talking with Tyrus Hinton, author of Baby Steps, I'm Diagnosed, Now What? The story of the loss of young Terrell to leukemia at a year and a half old, followed by a diagnosis of cancer for Tyrus himself, and how they navigated that journey. He gives a guide, steps to take as you process and navigate this journey in this book called Baby Steps, I'm Diagnosed, Now What? We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we're going to dig into some more of the steps and answer the question, where is God in all of these diagnoses of cancer, the tragic loss of a child, and the follow-on diagnosis. And here we're telling the story. We are talking about what we do now. While we still have our faith, we still have our love of the Lord, and we're on this side of the diagnosis and this side of the grief. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. Not everything that makes the headlines has biblical importance, but many events that happen around the world do, and you never hear about them. Igniting a Nation is pleased to teach Revealing Prophecy every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at the Marriott 280 in Birmingham. We will cover worldwide events and insider information that will connect the dots of what's happening around the world with biblical prophecy. If you happen to miss a class, we'll televise each week's class at 10 o'clock Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our social media outlets. Copies of the teachings will also be available to purchase on our website at www.ignitinganation.com. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Tyrus Hinton, author of Baby Steps, I'm Diagnosed, Now What? The story of his son, Terrell's battle against acute myeloid leukemia, the loss of his young life, followed immediately or very close to it with the diagnosis of cancer that Tyrus had to navigate while rebounding, trying to make sense of life after the loss of his son. Tyrus, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Thank you for having me.
Tyrus, you're now at a point in the treatment where the doctors are no longer optimistic. They're no longer telling you that they've got the trials. They have gone down several paths of treatment, and unfortunately, the response to the treatment is not encouraging. Take me to those final days when you come to the realization that you've got to pull together as one because something inevitable is about to happen? What do you do?
So Terrell was very fortunate in that he was able to have a bone marrow transplant. Our family was fortunate in that my daughter was able to be his bone marrow transplant donor. So, man, how amazing is that? Terrell's body began to reject the bone marrow transplant. It began to reject the marrow. Again, because there was a team of doctors, one doctor in particular had taken on my wife and I like we were her children, which we both know that professionally they're not supposed to do that.
Right.
But she couldn't help it. She said, when I look at you, I see my son. When I look at your wife, I see my daughter. And she says, I want to be very honest with you. His body's just not handling this well. We're trying every method we can to stimulate the marrow, stimulate his bone marrow to receive your daughter's, but it's just not working. At that time, I did what most people would not do. I went to the funeral home and I had a conversation with the undertaker. He's pretty close with our family. We've used him for years. And I said, hey, Ken, I need your help. And he says, what's going on? I says, well, you know, my son has been sick and his body's rejecting the bone marrow. And he says, wow, so what are you thinking? I said, I'm thinking I need you to tell me what is all involved in this process and how to get ourselves ready for it. And Ken looked at me and he says, wow, Tyrus, I would have never imagined that this is where we would be. But since you're here, let's talk about it. And we reviewed all of the steps that it would take, you know, what was necessary. And I went back to the hospital. Terrell kept living for a month and a half after that. He took a great turn. He started doing much, much better. And maybe 2 weeks before his death, he started sleeping a lot. And that doctor that had kind of started taking on us as her children and loving us, she says, listen, with the amount of sleep that he's doing, she called me on a Saturday. I was working, just getting off of work. She called me really early and at the job and told me, I need you to come to the hospital. We need to do some x-rays and a few MRIs because of the amount of sleep he's doing tells me that something else is at work here. He slept, and her suggestion to us was just to spend as much time as we could with him, bring his siblings as much as we could, tell our family because we did not know how much time we had. But she also stood in faith with us, saying that we're believing for healing. We want him to be healed. And we were believing for the same thing, but I'm not sure if we were really believing for the same thing, because my thought of healing was for him to not have to deal with that ever again. Her thought of healing was for him to get better so that they can say, yes, all of our practices worked. We tried all of these things and it happened. And while it may seem dark to some people, it was light for me because I said, man, you know, if he dies, my son will never have to worry about another needle. He'll never have to worry about another injection. He'll never have to worry. It wasn't even about my wife and I. It was about him. He would never have to worry about slipping in and out of remission. He would never have to worry about, you know, a lot of the kids that we saw walking with the poles and then, you know, limbs being affected. And of course, other natural breakdowns in their bodies. And as we led up to that point, you know, the team decided to speak with my wife and I. Of course, she wasn't working at that point, and I had just gotten off work, and they wanted to meet with us, I think about 11 o'clock one afternoon, the day that he died, actually. And they said, we need to know if you two would be willing to sign a DNR. Of course, we're young. We're in our 20s. We don't quite understand what you're talking about right now. Like, what do you mean? And Dr. Sadev, who I'm going to actually see in a couple of weeks, I'm going up to speak to the surviving, some children that have survived in a couple of weeks. And she says to me, what this means is that we will take some very drastic measures, which could include breaking your son's ribs and breaking some other things, and him really being worse off than he is right now should we try to resuscitate him. What we want to know from you two is, if his heart stopped, will you be okay? Can you please just let us stop it there? You talk about a tough decision, Rabbi Eric. You talk about a tough decision. You want me to just give you permission to let my 2-year-old son just die? And my wife and I, we sat there, we looked at each other, we cried a little bit. Dr. Sadev, she talked to us some more. They rubbed our backs. And I said, babe, let's do it. Let him be healed. And Dr. Sadev suggested that we both left the hospital at that point. She said, we're not doing anything different, but he's resting. The two of you go home and take in the information I just gave you. So we called our family. Families came over to the house. And Dr. Sadev called us a little bit later in the evening, said he's resting a little bit more. Are you guys able to come back to the hospital? By the time we got back to the hospital, Rabbi, my son had gone. And I kept saying, Lord, you know how to do things well. Because as a parent, no one wants to see their child take their last breath. And my wife was praying that my son would be healed because she couldn't take seeing him take his last breath. And God did it for us. So that's why I feel like where we are in our journey and where we were in our journey at that point, we were still full of faith, understanding and still believed that he would be healed. But our healing was much different than everyone else's thought of healing for him. So yeah, I'm not trying to sound strong. I'm really walking you through our thought process. And did we rejoice in that moment? Honestly, no. We was just like, wow. I remember saying, wow. I remember just saying, wow. And then my wife said, okay, God. And that was about it. At that point, we realized we got what we asked for. We asked for healing, and he was healed. We asked for a divine healing, and he was healed. Now, of course, there's two ways you can be healed. You can be healed like I'm healed, or you can be healed like he's healed. But I was glad for him that that battle was over, that he didn't have to fight anymore. So while, again, it might seem a little dark to some, it became light for us because our son didn't have to fight anymore. There was no more roller coasters. There was no more ups and downs. There was no more, we're gonna try this, we're gonna try that, we're gonna try this. At that point, he was able to be left alone and really rest in peace.
So you trusted in the Lord that his healing, to be absent from the body is to be present from the Lord. You knew where he was. Yes. You knew that he would no longer feel pain, no longer suffer. And that truly is the greatest gift we can give to him and pay the ultimate price, because it is that bittersweet loss in the natural. But the funerals that I do, I always say that people say to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. But I'm here to tell you that in this case, for this person to be absent from the body is a present for the Lord. Yes. And that's exactly how it was with your son as you looked at him, that heaven was gaining. You were losing, but heaven was gaining, and you maintained that attitude. As you process through the grief, most families, there's no universal way to process grief. There's no universal formula for processing grief. In the early days following, of course, it's hectic. There's a lot of activity. But then there comes a deafening silence, a deafening absence that is abrupt, almost as if a void, a supernatural silence consumes, where there were people scurrying around preparing meals and serving and helping out, and always somebody in some room. All of a sudden there is nobody there, and you have the reality that life is going to continue, and this is day one of our new life. How did you and your wife begin that process, and where did it take you?
Well, again, erasing that routine, we began to see what was next. My aunt was kind enough at that time to purchase a 7-day getaway for the four of us, my wife and my other two children at that time. And we went to the Poconos Mountains. We lived in New York. We went to the Poconos Mountains in Pennsylvania, and we stayed there for 7 days. And when we came back home, on the way back home, my wife and I talked. We had about a 4-hour drive, so we talked on the way back home. And she says, "Babe, do you want to go back and visit Maryland again? The state of Maryland." And I said, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it." We were on leave I was on leave from work at that point. My wife was on leave. And we decided to go back and visit Maryland again and visit our friends there. And when we came back to New York, we decided we were going to move. We relocated. That's really how we was able to move past that grief process. Now, I know that a lot of people are not able to do that, to just up and relocate after someone passes away. But for us, it was necessary to get in a different environment to help us heal. And we did just that. So like you said, after all of the busyness, after all of the company left, and actually we left the company because my aunt sent us away, so we left the company, even at our house. We had some folks from out of town staying, and we went on. And we came back and we relocated, and we began to build from there. I remember my wife saying one day she was driving along in Maryland, and she asked the Lord to not allow her to be sad every day. I remember her having that conversation with me. And I said, "You know what, babe? I was saying the same thing as I was on my way to work. I was like, God, I don't want to be a sad person. I don't want to be a bitter person. I don't want to be upset. I don't want to be angry." And not that we had felt any of that, but I believe we both began to start feeling that void. I think we both started feeling it even after relocation. And man, Rabbi Eric, when I tell you God did just that for us, he did it. That evening, we sat down. We always ate dinner at the table with all four of us. We always ate dinner at the table. And we laughed so much that night. We laughed about moving. We laughed about getting tired. We laughed about packing. We laughed about the things we left. We laughed about even some things in the hospital. We laughed about some of the things Terrell did. We laughed about some of the things that had happened. And we've been laughing ever since. We've just been enjoying. And it was in that moment, that evening, in that little apartment in Maryland, that God changed things for us. And we decided, you know what, we're going to help people. We're going to help people get through it, because we didn't have folks in our family that understood what we were dealing with. So all they could do was come, in between their times of work and just kind of be nice to us and, be a little helpful to us as much as they could, but they didn't understand the terminologies, and they didn't have the patience and the grace to deal. I remember, being there and them having to draw blood, and some of my family member having to leave the room. And I'm thinking, we don't ever get to leave the room. We have to hold them while they draw the blood. So to get away and think back on that, we decided we're going to help people. We're going to be that person in the room when there's a blood draw and the parent has had enough and the parent is exhausted and tired. We're going to be there. And at the request of families, we go. And we sit there, we take time. A lot of times, Rabbi, we're not talking. We're just in the room. We're just in the room. We found that silence has been more beneficial and helpful to some of these families. Our silence and our praying quietly there with them and just being support, just being present has been more helpful than sometimes. And that's what's been a healing bridge for us, helping other people and watching them get through it and watching them smile again. One big signature that we have is every time we go visit someone, we take smiley face balloons. That is just our thing. Did we invent the balloon? No, but we take them with us because we want them to know that you'll smile again. It might not be in this moment, but you'll smile. And every time you start to get aggravated and frustrated, I want you to look up at the balloons and smile. Just look up and say, okay, better days are coming. Better days are on the way. And that's kind of how we are healing through this process. Still healing, still healing. There are some days that we think about it. His birthday was June 8th, which was the same day I released the book on his birthday a couple of years back. And we were just sitting there at the dinner table just saying, man, happy birthday, Terrell. Happy birthday. Like, you have a way of keep bringing us together and making sure that we rejoice and don't become sad. So we're just enjoying, and that's kind of where we are. And I'm hoping that our efforts will help families not only hear the medical side of it, but feel the love that can conquer the pain of what you're dealing with right now. Because you need love to cover that. You need love to conquer it. You need love to help you through it. And you need a ear that can just listen. There's so many times we're sitting in the hospital, Rabbi, and we're just listening to the parents. And one lady, I remember her saying to me, oh, I'm just talking your ear off. I said, talk. Tell me what else you have. What else you got? What else has changed? What is new in medicine? What are they doing? What are the new remedies that are being tried? And that's how we're healing. Day by day, that's how we're healing.
You are teaching people, as my good friend Peter Rosenberger says, is to take our scared hand and put it into his scarred hand and not let go and let him pull us out of the despair that we are going to feel at the loss of a loved one. Before we run out of time, I want to just get a little brief blurb in on the Hinton Cares Foundation, which is your Hinton Cares organization.org. The book is Baby Steps, I'm Diagnosed Now What, but you've created the Hinton Cares Foundation, which is you and your wife are dedicating your time to helping families who are navigating what you navigated. And so I want to make sure that we let people know that this is something they can look into if they have a loved one who is going through this, to get them a copy of Baby Steps, I'm Diagnosed Now What, to visit HintonCaresOrganization.org. The proceeds all go to helping families, to give support to families. You've endured it 2 times, your son and yourself. You know the needs firsthand that families have to face, and you decided that you were going to do something about it. So we thank you for sharing with us your insights, your real story of loss and heaven's gain, your ability to navigate this process and devote your lives to helping those who are going through these same challenges. Again, it's HintonCaresOrganization.org, or you can go to Baby Steps, I'm Diagnosed Now What, thebook.com, and get a copy for yourself. Keep some on hand to be able to give to others who are navigating this, and don't let them trust Google for the advice and for the help. Give them real life help based on the experiences of Tyrus Hinton and his wife. Tyrus, thank you for sharing this story here with us on Revealing the Truth.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. God bless you, my friend. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we will bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.